If you're new to vibe coding, one of the most important skills you need to learn from the traditional software development world is how to use GitHub. In this video, we're going to show you exactly the 80/20 you need to know to get the most out of it without all the technical headache. First step is to make a free account on github.com. It's an industry standard. Practically every single software company uses it, and it's owned by Microsoft. You also need to be able to access Git within your command line. Now, if you're using different vibe coding tools on your computer, you might have already installed it through installing some of those tools. Go ahead and go over to your terminal, type git space dash version. I have it right here. If it does not work for you though, you have to head down to the description and go to git-csm.com. Install this. It should work for Windows and Mac, and follow the steps. Afterwards, make a new terminal, and then you should be able to use GitHub. Now, if that doesn't work, Claude and OpenAI are both well-versed on exactly how to install this on your computer, so just walk through a chat with them, and you should be good to go. Either way, once you have GitHub installed, let's move forward. You want to go ahead and create a new repository. Now, a repository is basically just a place where we can store all of our snapshots or save points of our code base, because AI does still mess up, so having these is incredibly useful. It's also incredibly convenient because a lot of hosting companies, such as Vercel, allow you to integrate into a GitHub repository and it will automatically deploy that project to the website. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing inside this video. We're going to create a basic website. We're going to push it to a GitHub repository. Then we're going to deploy it to the internet. And we're going to see how anytime we make a change, we're going to build a custom Claude skill to push to GitHub with a meaningful message of what changed. And automatically Vercel will see that and redeploy our changes to the live website. So let's actually get started. Go to github.com/new. Once you make an account, you should see a page similar to this one. Repository name is basically the name of your project. In my case, I'm just going to call this YouTube demo. But if you want to try this out with a real project, name it the name of your project. Then afterwards, go to choose visibility, change this to private. Then click on create repository right at the bottom. We now have all of these commands here, and don't worry, these are actually fairly simple. This is basically just setting up the repository on our local computer and then linking it with this repository that we just created right here. Again, think of a repository as like a fancy folder on GitHub that allows us to have save points or snapshots or what's known as commits of our current code base on the cloud. And there's a chance that some of the tools you're using might already have a GitHub repository initialized. You simply just want to say git add dot or period. That's going to add all the files. And then afterwards, you want to paste in the rest of the things, starting with git commit. Now, in my case, I didn't have anything in this folder, so I went ahead and ran all the commands. So if I do ls here to list the files, we do see a README file right here, which was created as the very first line that says echo YouTube demo into README empty. Now, after we run this, if you go back over to GitHub and you click on refresh, we now see this README file right here. If I click on that, we now see that there's not much in here, just the name of the project. But we now officially have a GitHub repository on the website that is a link to our local repository on our project folder. Now I'm going to go into Claude. I'm going to generate a basic website. If you already have a project you're working with, use the chapters down below on YouTube to skip to the next section. So here I'm going to say create a basic Next.js Hello World project. It might ask you a couple questions. For example, in this case, it's having a problem with the README because it's going to try and create its own README, but it already exists. So in this case, it's going to say, hey, I want to actually delete this with the remove command and then create the project. That's okay with us. That README was temporary anyway. I'm going to go ahead and click on yes. And from time to time, it might ask you if it's okay to edit this. You can go ahead and click yes each time or click on option 2, which is allow all edits for the session. That's up to you. All right, it seems like it finished. It's mentioning to run npm run dev. Let's head over to our other terminal. And if I do clear and then I do ls, we can see we have a lot more files here. We can go ahead and do npm run dev. Then you can go ahead and take the local URL, which is likely localhost, and open that up. And we have our basic hello world, good enough for the demo. So now we can use Control-C to go ahead and stop that. And now I'm going to say git space status. And here we see all the different changes. Now it's important that we have access to what is known as a git ignore file, which we see right here. So I can actually say cat space dot git ignore, and you can press tab to autocomplete this. And inside we have a number of things that we never want to push to our GitHub repository. For example, any type of environment variable, you never want to push that to your GitHub repository, especially if your repository is public. These are basically your passwords, your API keys. Never want to share those on GitHub. There are ways to put those on Vercel, which we're going to see here in a few minutes. And the way to do that is not through GitHub. Never want to push anything to GitHub. You also want to avoid things like next right here, Or if we go up, node modules. These are things that are not necessary to put into GitHub. Only the raw code, not our dependencies or the software we're installing to run the code, should be involved in GitHub. Usually you can ask Claude Code to generate a .gitignore file, and it'll look at the project and understand exactly what should or shouldn't be included, and it'll do most of the heavy lifting for you. But the most important ones are .env and node modules. You don't want to push those to your repository. But now that we have access to that, if I go back to git status, we have a bunch of files here. We want to push these to our repo. We could say git add dot, and then we could say git status again. And don't worry, you don't have to type out all these commands every time. After we get everything working, I'm going to show you how to set up a Claude skill to do this for you. And here we have all these green files. Beforehand, they were red. That means they were not committed. But now they are committed, and they're ready to be pushed or uploaded to our repository in the cloud. So now we could say git commit -m. Lowercase m here is important. Then double quotes. Here's where you want to put a short but meaningful message. In this case, we could say create Next.js hello world app. Cool. Then if we do git status, we don't see those files anymore because they are committed. Now we have to push those files or upload those files. We can do that with a simple git push. Now I'm walking through these commands manually just so you have a better understanding of how all this is working under the hood and how the skills are going to work once we create those towards the end of the video. But now, if we go back over to the GitHub repository and we refresh, we now see all of these files right here. So if you ever make any changes or finish any features, you want to head into your console and you want to run those commands. And if you follow the entire video, you'll see exactly how to tell Claude Code to do that with a simple command as well. So while we're here, let's go ahead and deploy this to Vercel. And if you're not interested in using Vercel or you already know how to do that, skip to the next section using the YouTube chapter down below. Okay, so head over to vercel.com. You can make a free account and you can also deploy your website for free. I believe they start charging after a certain amount of traffic, so perfectly fine to do throughout this video. And head over to vercel.com/new, and we're going to create a new project. Now, when you're making your Vercel account, it's important that you log in with the same exact GitHub account that you already created. That way, whenever that happens, you have access to all of your GitHub repositories right here. For example, I see the YouTube demo right here. We can go ahead and import that. Now, in this case, environment variables right here, if you click on that, if you have environment variables, you can go ahead and copy and paste those in. For example, within this project, if I do cat.env, I just created this, the environment variable is please equals subscribe. So we can go ahead and copy the entire file, all key value pairs with all the different lines, and then paste it in here. And even if you had a bunch of these, it would paste all of them in and make them ready to use. Now, this is how you get your environment variables into Vercel. You do not want to ever push them to GitHub. At this stage, we can go ahead and click on deploy, and then it's going to start building and deploying here. If you get any errors, you have to copy those errors. There should be a copy button, put them back into the same Claude Code chat. It'll start building and trying that out. And then once you get that working, you could then do git push again. Make sure you go through the whole steps, git add dot, git commit -m with the message, and then git push. And again, we're going to be simplifying that towards the end of the video. But here you see it worked. So I can go ahead and click on this. And we now have this exact URL that says hello world. Perfect. Now, if I click on the back and I come into the project, we have a couple things on the left. For deployments, we're going to see all the different deployments. We're going to see how there's only one right here. But in a few minutes, when we go to make a couple changes, we are going to see a new deployment happen automatically without us having to redo a bunch of stuff. Also, if you go over to logs, whenever you're going to have any type of back-end logging on the API routes or the back-end server, you're going to find those here. So let's go back to deployments. Let's go ahead and make a couple changes. Then Claude Code, I'm going to say, can you make it look better? Obviously, you can add whatever changes you want to your project just to make sure it's visibly different. This is vague enough where we're going to see something that's different, and we don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. Perfect. Let's now go back, and I want to create a skill that will allow us to push this to GitHub automatically without us having to type in all those commands every single time. This is how I just do /git, and there's a push-to-git skill that I've created that it'll automatically look at the changes here. It'll create a short message, not the one that has a bunch of information and tags Anthropic and all of that, and then it'll go ahead and push automatically for me. Okay, here's how simple this skill is, and this will be in the description so you can easily copy and paste it. This is the skill right here. The name is push-to-git. The description is stage all changes, commit with a short message, and push to the origin. And then we're going to go through and basically just describe what we want to do. Now, in this case, I'm mentioning that I want the commit message to be short, 3 to 6 words. And so it's not going to have all that different Anthropic tagging and credits and all that stuff. It's just going to be super short in the same exact format that I usually do this. So you can go ahead and just copy and paste this in to Claude and ask it, hey, create this skill. and then paste this in, and it should create it for you. Afterwards, you might have to restart a new terminal. If you do, just navigate into your folder with your Next.js app, and then simply open up Claude again, and then we should be able to run a command similar to this. If I just type /git, there's a push to git right here. I can go ahead and click enter, and now it's going to run that skill for me. You can see that it's running this command right here, git add dot, git commit, and then here is the message, style hello world page with gradient, and we're pushing. Now if I go back over to my terminal and I do git status, there's no changes. If I head back over to GitHub, we see 7 minutes to go, and if I refresh, we now see this one right here says now, and this is where the main source code is. So it did push correctly. Let's head back over to Vercel, and we now see a second deployment automatically. If I go over to overview, we can now click on this image here. As you can tell, we now have access to our new website thanks to that git skill that pushed to GitHub and it also pushed to Vercel. And this is incredibly powerful because as you're completing new features, you might want to push them to GitHub. Now, to not make this video too long or complicated, I've cut out a couple things here, but some other things you might want to dive into is how to use branches and staging environments. But this is definitely the 80-20 of using GitHub.